You're listening to the Financial Source podcast on YouTube.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Financial Source podcast. We're glad you're joining us for another essential deep dive.
We're in episode 6 of about a 100-part series designed to walk through macro fundamentals from the ground up. So if you're new to the world of economics, trading, or policy, this series is definitely built for you.
This episode is called, Who Are the Players in the Market?
Yeah.
You know, most people look at a market chart and they almost immediately feel watched, maybe even targeted.
Yeah.
There's this belief their losses are part of some grand design, maybe an invisible puppet master pulling strings.
Yeah, that's a common feeling. But understanding the true structure, the real distribution of market volume right now, it kind of strips away that emotion and fear. It helps you think more like a professional strategist, rather than feeling like a target.
So today, we're going to break down the heavyweights like the interbank market, look at the necessity traders, the central banks too, revealing where the true liquidity and influence actually lie.
Okay, let's unpack this.
So the first, and I think maybe the most critical mindset shift for anyone engaging with financial markets, it really has to be moving away from just the visual stuff. We spend so much time staring at candlesticks, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we really need to stop asking, okay, what pattern do I see here? And instead start asking, who exactly am I trading with?
That is absolutely a core difference. It's the difference between, gambling and acting like a professional. If you don't get that perspective, you inevitably fall for that whole puppet master myth.
Right.
You start believing that some trader, sitting at a huge bank has somehow singled out your specific tiny little position and is actively moving the market just to get you.
I mean, I get it, though. It feels personal sometimes, doesn't it? When you have this perfectly placed stop loss and bam, it gets hit just fractions before the price takes off in the direction you thought. If it's structural, like you say, not personal, how do we actually overcome that gut feeling of being completely run over?
It really comes down to understanding scale. Once you grasp the sheer, almost astronomical size of the transactions we're about to talk about, that illusion of being individually targeted, it just fades. Instantly. The market doesn't know you're there. Honestly, it's not interested in your $5,000 account or even a $50,000 account. It's this vast ocean of institutional and corporate flows. Internalizing that scale, that's the fundamental shift. That's what makes the entire game start to make a lot more sense.
Okay, scale. So let's start with maybe the player that casts the longest shadow, even if their actual day-to-day trading volume is surprisingly low. Central banks. I sometimes use the analogy that they're like the moon in the market ocean.
I like that.
They control the gravity, setting the long-term tides, but they aren't actually out there making every single wave we see minute to minute.
That's a really powerful analogy, actually, because when we talk about institutions like the Federal Reserve or the ECB in Europe, the Bank of Japan, we have to remember their fundamental job. They are not profit-driven speculators. Not at all. Their mandate is managing national monetary policy, setting interest rates, basically the cost of money, and ensuring broad economic stability. Profit isn't the goal.
Which makes this next statistic kind of floor people when they first hear it. Central banks. They only account for about 1% of actual foreign exchange and transaction volume. 1%. So wait, if the Fed only accounts for 1%, why does the entire market seem to hang on every single syllable Chairman Powell utters? That feels like a huge disconnect, doesn't it? Volume versus influence.
It is, and it's a really key distinction to make between flow and sentiment. While their direct trading volume is tiny, they might occasionally step in to maybe shore up their own currency, but that's pretty rare. Their influence on direction is just massive, that 1%. Think of it as the ultimate signal driver. When a central bank even hints at, say, raising interest rates for the euro-dollar, they're essentially broadcasting the future direction of the tide, even if the actual daily sloshing of water is handled by completely different players.
So it's their communication, the forward guidance we hear about.
Exactly. That sets the long-term stage. It determines where the really big institutional capital is going to start positioning itself for the next, say, 12 to 18 months.
Okay, so central banks set the magnetic field, the overall direction. But who's actually responsible for the bulk of the movement? You mentioned a huge percentage earlier.
Yeah.
Like 63% of the daily current.
Yes.
Here's where it gets really interesting then, because now we move to the undisputed heavyweight champion, the interbank market.
This is the core engine. This is the deep sea, right? The interbank market is where the vast, vast majority of daily trading volume actually happens. And it's dominated by the world's largest commercial and investment banks. We're talking Citibank, UBS, HSBC, Barclays, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, the giant.
And these aren't just big players. They're essentially the entire plumbing system for the FX market.
Precisely. And the volume data here, it's just staggering. These institutions collectively, they make up more than 63% of all global FX volume. It's immense. And this flow is so critical because they're acting in two main ways at the same time. One, as huge counterparties for big trades, but maybe more importantly, as continuous liquidity providers. You might hear them called market makers.
So their main role in the interbank market isn't necessarily just making speculative bets on where currencies are going. It's more about keeping the market functioning, keeping it efficient.
Exactly right. The liquidity provided by this huge 63% chunk is the main reason why you see very few price gaps in the foreign exchange market, especially compared to something like stocks.
Interesting.
These banks are just constantly willing to buy and sell, absorbing supply and demand almost instantaneously. Now, sure, you absolutely have proprietary trading desks within these banks making directional bets.
Of course.
But the vast, vast majority of that 63%, it's structural provision. They're there to facilitate trades for everyone else, ensuring those continuous supply lines are open. They're kind of like the lubricant, the thing that reduces friction and keeps the whole system moving smoothly.
Wow. Okay, the implication then for us as learners or smaller traders is pretty profound. You're basically saying you won't outsmart this group because they are, in a very real sense, the market itself.
Pretty much.
So the goal isn't to try and beat them at their own game. It's more about observation, like watching how their massive current is flowing.
Yeah.
And just making sure you don't park your little dinghy right in their path when they decide to collectively move on a major trend.
That is the key distinction. Yes. Observe and align, don't fight. Now, let's maybe pivot slightly away from purely financial motivations and look at a different group, one driven more by logistics, the corporate participants.
Right. These are the huge global businesses. We all know the Nestle's, the Apples, the Boeings of the world. And they're often trading simply out of necessity, right? Not really speculation.
Their reason for being in the FX market is almost purely operational. Think about it. A big European multinational, they need to convert euros into US dollars to pay their suppliers over in Chicago.
Exactly.
Or maybe they need to bring profits from their Japanese subsidiary back home into euros. They trade because they have to, pretty much regardless of where the euro-yen chart happens to be sitting that particular day.
And crucially, they're generally not concerned with technical analysis, are they? They aren't sitting there looking for Fibonacci retracements or waiting for a moving average to cross over.
Correct. Traditional technical analysis, looking for chart patterns, checking fib levels, totally irrelevant to a corporate treasurer. Their motive is logistics. It's about minimizing the cost of converting currency, not really speculating on where the market's heading next.
Yeah.
The price movement itself is almost secondary to the fundamental requirement of getting the currency they need to run their global operations.
But even if they're not speculating, their trades can be huge, right? Like massive blocks of currency flow hitting the market. So what kind of impact does this logistical necessity actually have on daily prices?
Well, corporates account for roughly 7% of transactions. Now, that sounds relatively small compared to the interbank giants, that's 63%.
Yeah, it does.
But their impact can still be quite significant because their trades are often large, they can be sudden, and they're frequently unscheduled, not tied to specific data releases. Think about a major company finalizing a huge cross-border acquisition, or maybe a massive airline needing to hedge its jet fuel costs for the entire next fiscal year. These block transactions can cause sudden, sharp price spikes or dips because they represent a huge single-sided flow hitting the market, often without any obvious traditional macro catalyst behind it.
Got it. So not all market flow is about directional betting. Some of it is just the cost of doing global business, basically. But it creates these ripples, these temporary distortions, maybe, that a watchful trader could potentially spot and maybe avoid getting caught on the wrong side of.
Exactly, and that leads us quite nicely into the next group, whose motivation is almost pure scaled intent. If those corporate necessity flows create ripples, these next players, we're talking hedge funds, proprietary trading firms, they can create tectonic shifts.
Okay, so this group includes those prop trading desks we mentioned inside banks, but also the big standalone hedge funds, pension funds managing trillions, even sovereign wealth funds. These are the players deploying really serious intentional capital and they've got immense analytical resources behind them.
Absolutely. They account for just over 20% of global FX volume. Now think about that, over 20%, and consider that this is almost entirely directional trading.
Wow.
When these entities put on a trade, it's not based on some gut feeling or, a pattern they saw on a trading forum. Their moves are backed by teams of economists, deep fundamental research, and highly sophisticated risk frameworks.
Can you elaborate a bit on what sophisticated risk frameworks really means in practice? Like, how do they operate differently?
Sure. It means they're definitely not just clicking buy market and hoping for the best. They use complex tools like value at risk modeling or VAR to rigorously define exactly how much exposure they're taking on. And crucially, they rely very heavily on execution algorithms, algos.
Right, the algos.
These algos break up their enormous orders, maybe billions of dollars worth, into tiny, tiny pieces. So if they need to buy, say, 5 billion euro dollar, they won't do it all at once. They'll execute that trade slowly, maybe over days or even weeks, in these small increments. Why? To minimize their own footprint, to avoid instantly pushing the market against themselves before they've built their full position.
Okay, that makes sense. So the smart approach then, for the learner, the individual trader, is realizing that trying to directly fight these giants is just, well, it's a fool's errand, isn't it?
It really is.
So instead of trying to read their minds, which is impossible, we should be focusing on finding their footprints in the market data. Is that how we align with them?
That's precisely it. You look for the structural evidence of what they're doing. Alignment means watching how price reacts around major data releases, tracking those large-scale positioning shifts. Sometimes you can get clues from public data like the commitment of traders or COT report, and just observing how price behaves at key liquidity zones where these big orders might be getting filled.
Okay.
When the underlying fundamentals line up with a strong, observable bias from these big players, that's when you might consider jumping in. You're not trying to lead the charge. You're basically following the cavalry.
Right, following the big money flow. And that brings us, finally, to the retail crowd.
That's us.
Right, the individual traders working through our online brokers.
That's us. And it's important to keep perspective here. Retail flow, yes, it adds liquidity. It's part of the ecosystem, but it still represents a very, very small slice of the overall market volume when you stack it up against that 63% interbank flow and the 20% plus institutional flow.
A drop in the ocean, really.
Here, in terms of raw volume deployment. Pretty much, yeah. We are a drop in the ocean.
But the retail crowd does play an interesting role, maybe less in terms of raw volume and more in signaling something.
Absolutely. Retail flow often serves a really crucial contrarian function. Because, let's be honest, the retail crowd often trades based more on emotion or media hype or maybe overly simplistic technical patterns without really grasping the deeper macro context.
Yeah, guilty is charged sometimes early on.
We've all been there. But because of that, their collective sentiment often creates extremes in the market. When you see the broad retail crowd getting emotionally way too bullish or way too bearish on a particular currency pair, especially when there isn't strong, sustained macro evidence backing that feeling, what often happens?
The price snaps back hard in the other direction.
Frequently, yes, violently sometimes. Retail sentiment extremes can act as a useful gauge for emotional excess in the market, an excess that smarter, larger institutional traders are often quite happy to fade or trade against.
Okay, this has been a massive deep dive into the actual structure behind the price chart. Let's maybe try and wrap up by focusing on the professional mindset. What are the big psychological shifts we gain when we stop seeing the market as some kind of conspiracy and start seeing it for the structure it is? Maybe 3 key takeaways.
Okay, 3 shifts. First, and this is maybe the most important one for trading psychology, you truly internalize it's not personal. You've successfully killed off that puppet master myth in your head.
Right.
When your stop loss gets hit, it wasn't some personal attack by a shadowy bank trader hunting you down. It was much more likely just the tide shifting, maybe driven by huge, non-speculative corporate flows we talked about, or maybe just the execution algorithms from that massive 63% interbank core doing their thing. Yeah. Accepting this, it improves your trading psychology almost overnight.
That's huge. Okay, what's the second shift? Moving from fear to strategy.
Exactly. The second takeaway is align. Don't compete. Those big institutions, they become your roadmap, not your enemy. Your job isn't to try and beat the hedge funds deploying billions you won't. Your job is to observe their footprints.
Let's prints again.
Yeah, the positioning shifts, how they react to data, the movement of liquidity, and then you follow the path they seem to be carving out. Think of it like aligning your small ship with the direction their massive tankers are already heading.
Okay, align, don't compete. Makes sense. And the third takeaway, what's the actionable insight?
The third one is about focus. Compete with the crowd. Your real competition isn't Goldman Sachs. It's the large percentage of other retail traders out there who are, frankly, underprepared. They're trading purely on emotion. They're ignoring the fundamentals we discuss in this series. They often lack a structured plan. Beating them doesn't require genius-level insights or some secret inside line. It just requires consistency, calm execution, having a structure, and sticking to a process-driven approach. If you can master those fundamentals, you're already operating like a professional, regardless of how much capital you have right now.
So seeing the market as this living system, this ecosystem of different incentives and flows, rather than just a rigged casino, that's what gives you the clarity to trade strategically.
Obviously.
This knowledge helps you stop flinching at every minor stop out, maybe helps you avoid chasing those weird spikes caused by some corporate needing to buy fuel, and instead wait patiently for those higher probability moments when the giants, the institutions, seem to be demonstrably moving in your favor.
Understanding the incentives and, crucially, the scale of all these different players transforms speculation into actual strategy. It gives you a true, solid foundation for trading professionally.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today. Understanding the structure of the players is truly fundamental to trading professionally.
Appreciate you tuning in. Join us again next time on the Financial Source podcast as we continue our series on macro fundamentals.